All right, my name is Connie Brothers. I'm a councilwoman from Revelstoke, and I'm here to give a 5-minute presentation on an issue of City Hall. What I've realized is, being a new councillor, the ins and outs of City Hall and understanding them have been a little bit difficult. I also recognize that from a public's point of view, they too have difficulties about how City Hall works. So what I'm going to talk about today is exactly that, how City Hall works. Everybody knows there's one mayor and 6 city councillors. These are the elected officials. We have what is affectionately called a weak mayor system. In other words, our mayor has no more power than all of the council people at the table. We all have one vote, we all have the same powers. What the mayor's role really is leadership for council, representation of council, in other words, what the council's views are, and also, obviously, all council members can't traipse into meetings with government, other levels of government, and so we have to have the mayor represent us in that role. But the mayor doesn't make decisions on his or her own. The mayor, if the mayor has to make a decision, the mayor has to come back to council, and council makes any important decisions. Now, how council interfaces with City Hall, that's one question that always comes up. As councilmen, we don't operate the day-to-day operations of City Hall. We're not involved in that process. That's what staff does. They do the day-to-day operations, and their boss is the Chief Administrative Officer. And the Chief Administration Officer reports to council and interfaces with council. He is effectively the only employee that City Hall has, or that the council has. So we don't have a full-time Chief Administrative Officer now. We're in the midst of receiving applications for Chief Administrative Officers. Right now, Graham Ingalls is the acting Chief Administrative Officer. So it's not, as I indicated, it's not up to council members to interfere with the work that City Hall does. The role of council is essentially to provide guidance for city and their staff, to deal with bylaws and laws of city, and to make rulings on bylaws and the laws of the city, to deal with problems that the city has, major problems that need some input from council. There's also a committee system, and that is where the bulk of the work gets done by council people and interfacing with staff. Each council person has been appointed as a chair of a particular committee. There are various committees. For example, I'm on the Economic Development Committee, and I chair that committee. Parks and Rec, Councillor Orlando is on that. Public Works, Councillor Schultz is on that. Security is Councillor English. Planning is Councillor Duke, and Finance is Councillor Nixon. So if you equate that to sort of the federal government, these are your cabinet ministers, and in fact they are the ones who sit in on the workings of what's going on with that particular department. So these meetings are public meetings. They happen on a regular basis, either monthly or usually every 2 months. And what gets discussed there are important issues with respect to that particular department. It can be budget issues. It could be a problem that arises in that particular department. So that is where the councilman will get input from the staff as to what's happening, what the solutions are. Those discussions can take place. The committee then reports to council itself. So on a regular basis, I think once a month, there is a report from each of the committees to council. And any questions regarding those can be asked by council at that time. And it's up to council when they're making a decision to ask questions of the individual chair of a committee about a particular problem or a particular issue that's come up with council. The only other thing that I wanted to say on that is People will notice that staff gives reports to council on votes that have to come before council. Staff gives reports, they give recommendations. The recommendations are not to be rubber stamped by council. The role of council is to make sure they understand the issue and to take the recommendations and pay attention to them of the staff, but to ultimately make the decision as to what is going to happen on that particular vote or that particular issue. And that is why the committee is so important, because that is where a councillor will get all of the input from staff as to what that issue is all about. Last thing I want to say is that meetings are to be open meetings. All of the business of a council is to be conducted in an open meeting, and that's why we have council meetings every 2 weeks. Everybody asks what are in camera and what goes in camera. Very few issues are to be in camera, and council has to be very careful that issues that are not to be in camera are in fact done in open. So there are only just about 3 or 4 issues that must be in camera. Those are issues like if they're within the Freedom of Information Act and privacy laws. Usually legal negotiations must be in camera, and personnel issues, things dealing with land usually are in camera. But every time something comes in camera, council has to say, is this an issue that should be an open council or should be in camera? As well, if a matter has been in camera but is now finished and completed such that it can go back into open council, it has to go back in open council. Again, it's incumbent upon council to make that decision with each particular matter, because everything is to be in open council. And that's about all I can say about council and how the inner workings of City Hall are.